Hey, welcome everybody to our newest show, Real Assurance. The only show to give you real assurance about the real insurance you need to protect and run your businesses today with the man who's been doing it for a long time. Meet our new host, Eddy Canavan. Hey, Eddy.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Give us an idea. Who's Eddy Canavan? First of all, you're the only guy I've ever met other than Ed Kooky Burns from the 60s who spells Ed with two D's here.
Well, so I have to blame my kindergarten teacher on that one, Paul.
Eddy. It's kind of like reminds me of EDDY. It reminds me of the eddies in the ocean.
That's
and the
right.
currents going through it. So we're gonna talk about a current that I don't think currently anybody knows anything about, and that is insurance. What the heck has happened to insurance through the years? It's gotten more complicated, more confusing, more threats every day. And I find myself just, as a business owner, just sticking my head in the sand and saying, forget about it. I don't even want to think about it.
So is our world. So is the environment around us. It's become more complicated, more convoluted, more difficult to navigate. So, when people ask me why I'm doing this show, it's really because of the what ifs. Insurance is about the what ifs.
Right.
And the what ifs are getting more and more frequent. So
frightening.
Yes. So we want to do this show to really get real about insurance coverage, to get real about dealing with carriers, getting real with the results of legislation in Sacramento that will impact small business owners in regards to insurance and coverage. Get real on how this impacts them, impacts their understanding of the market. And really, I want to help the underserved market of businesses, and that is the small to medium-sized business owners.
Amen. Welcome. Where you been? Can I give you a couple of stories? We shared some of these when we were just talking about this show. I've run a radio station now for 12 years. Was in real radio for a million years before that. But in between, I tried every crazy business I could think of, including a bar in Mission Viejo for 10 years that my buddies and I built thinking, won't this be fun? It was called Kelly McHugh's. It was an Irish pub there for many, many years. Why isn't it there anymore? Because the whole building, the whole shopping center caught fire one day. And when the smoke cleared, our insurance was so crummy, so crappy, we couldn't rebuild the darn thing. We never thought about it. All we thought about is we had to get something to satisfy the landlord. We didn't know if this business would fly or not. And we were just looking to cover the basics and keep it as cheap as possible. And in the end run, we never looked at it as the business grew. In the end run, we didn't have enough money, for example, to rebuild the bathrooms and the kitchen because the landlord had put that money in the beginning. Now it's 4 landlords later and he's not going to do that. And so we didn't have another $150,000 to build the kitchens and the bathrooms that were there when we started. Was there any way to predict or prevent any of that? What should we have done? Should we have just reviewed it more often or thought more carefully at the beginning, or both?
Right. So let's rewind a bit.
Yeah.
So, I'm a small business owner, and so I understand how busy business owners are, especially when you're starting a new venture. And the issue is that you're doing so many things. You're hiring people, you're getting supplies, you're getting contracts in place. And of course, you need insurance, not only for your landlord, but also to make sure you have workers' compensation, which is compulsory. You have
Clearly.
to have that. So you do what you need to do to satisfy that requirement.
But it was the last thing I thought of, not the first thing I thought of.
Right, but you're not necessarily reading the policies. You're not necessarily talking to a broker on what does this mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in your case, what the issue was is that you didn't necessarily look at your policies annually to make sure they kept up with your business.
No.
And this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that small business owners make because they do not have a quote unquote risk manager that takes the time then to review these policies during renewal and look at things like, what's the value of the business personal property, the equipment, the refrigerators, what we have
What we've added through the years.
Have we added a new product or service to what we do for our customers? And the problem is that 5 years, 7 years, 10 years go by, your business, which you said was worth $300,000 when you started it, is now worth $1 million.
Yeah.
But guess what? Your policy states $300,000,
exactly.
Dwelling, equipment, what have you. So in the event of a very unfortunate circumstance that you experienced a total loss due to a fire, then you're looking at your insurance policy and I don't have enough coverage to actually pay for this loss.
We sure didn't.
And you either aren't able to restart your business, like in your unfortunate example, or you have to come out of pocket. Either way is not a very palatable solution to that issue. And this is not something that is uncommon. It happens quite a bit with small
Well,
business
so
owners.
you think I'd learn, but here I've now, for 12 years, I've been running this radio station out of UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. We produce 20-some different shows for a variety of people on a variety of different business topics. I've always thought insurance would be a fascinating one. People go, nobody's going to listen to think about insurance. Nobody wants to think about insurance.
Right.
They don't. This is dry. It's dull. It's
Right.
confusing. It's complex. I'm like, it's critical though. It's critical. Maybe based on that experience I had. Maybe you got to get burned once, literally, before you realize how important some of these what ifs can be. Is that true?
It's true. I mean, and it is dry. And it's complicated, and nobody wants to read a 120-page policy. It is overwhelming. It is time consuming, and
it's in mumbo jumbo. I don't even know what they're saying.
You may not have the expertise to really understand what it says. That's why I always encourage small business owners to really rely on their broker. That's the broker's role, right? Is to make sure that they understand what that policy says, what the coverage means, what the premium is buying them, and that to explain some of those what ifs. You have a premium at this level and it's getting you X.
Right.
And if this happens, then you may be in a situation where you're not covered. So do we want to look at something else, an umbrella policy, a more robust policy, understanding that it can be more expensive,
Right.
but it's buyer beware. Ultimately, you're the consumer. You're the one that needs to satisfy the basic requirements. But other than that, it's really up to the consumer as to what coverage they're going to purchase based on their individual circumstances.
And too often, I think that's what determines my insurance coverage. It's what the landlord required in
Right.
the lease.
That's right.
Here I've got a lease here, and I laughed as you walked in. I'm suddenly saying, my business. I mean, what it's called, my business insurance policy. That's all I think of it as.
Right.
Was dictated to me by the terms of the lease. They want to have certain liability and some other issues in there because the landlord doesn't want to get sued. So they want to
Right.
make sure they're named as an additional insured and that you're properly covered. And I want to have something in case, God forbid, another fire happens. So everything. Beyond that, I don't really know what's in this umbrella business policy. And when
Right.
I got the renewal, which I just showed you today, it doesn't tell me. I haven't looked at that policy in 2 years. So it just says, you're up for renewal, send us another $500 and we'll be happy to put that policy back into effect here.
Right. And look, I mean, I deal with a lot of business owners that lease their space. And whenever they come to me, I say the first thing I need from you is a copy of your lease agreement.
Wow.
Because I need to understand what the landlord is requiring in regards to coverage. And by and large, what they're really concerned with is liability.
Right.
If I come in here, slip and fall and break my neck, they do not want my family coming back to them. So they want to make
Because they
sure
got a deeper pocket than I
Right,
do,
that's right.
probably. So they're,
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So they want to make sure that they're covered for that. Outside of that, they're not going to worry about all of your equipment here, your mics, your amps, your mix board, everything that you have in front of
Ton
us.
of stuff.
That-
which
that
is
all
more today than when I started moved in here 2 years ago.
Absolutely. So, that's why I always encourage business owners, small business owners, that 3 months from the renewal date, a call to action, 3 months from your renewal date, you really need to set aside an hour. Have a conversation with your broker and say, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what my business is doing. This is how I've grown. This is what I'm now offering. Do I need to update my policies? Do I need to increase my coverage? Or am I good? And again, that hour could save you hundreds of thousands of
I
dollars.
wish we'd
they've
spend an
lost.
hour somewhere along the 10 years of operating Kelly McHughes. So let me give you another sad admission. I don't know who my broker is because I didn't pick them. Somebody just said, well, try this guy. In this case, it was the landlord here. I said, I don't know where to go to get a business policy that meets your requirements. They
Right.
said, well, here's somebody we've used for other tenants. Okay.
Right.
Or when we opened the bar and restaurant, we couldn't find anybody that understood that. And somebody somewhere, I think it was the landlord, said, I've done other restaurants here, try this one. So it wasn't like I had a relationship. It was a once and done thing. I bought it, and then I never saw them or heard from them again.
Right. So, Paul, what do we do today when we have a need and we're not sure where to go?
We go on the internet for
We
sure.
go on the internet and we use a search engine and we do a few keywords and something pops up
Right.
and we click on it.
Right.
With insurance, there's a time and place for everything. I don't want to disparage this method because I truly feel that there is a time and place for everything. But
Right.
what is happening now is it's a click market where
Yeah.
you can get insurance
I get
on
a
the
quick
internet.
quote and yeah.
Quick quote, you put in some information, here's your policy. If you are running a small business, you owe it to yourself to find a broker.
Yeah.
Find a broker that knows the market, knows what they're doing, understands your business, understands who to go to in the market to get the right coverage at the right price. And, clicking around the internet is fine. Educate yourself, right? Educate yourself when you make that decision. You always want to make the right decision you feel comfortable with by having some foundational understanding of what you're doing. But outside of that, really rely on a professional, because brokers, I think it's misunderstood that brokers are paid as a percentage of the policy.
Right.
So you're going to pretty much pay the same amount of money, but you're going to have a professional tell you if you need to do something different, add something in, take something out. And again, in that unfortunate circumstance where you have a total loss or just even a loss, that you're not surprised when the carrier comes back and says no.
Why do we think we can do it ourselves? We live in a world where I think I can sell my house myself. I can be my own stockbroker. I can be an expert on all these things that I don't really know enough about. I don't even know what I don't know.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, e-commerce is great. I love Amazon. Not to plug Amazon unintentionally, but
We all do every day somehow.
This guy's coming to my house every other day with something in his hands, delivering it to me. So
Yeah.
I think that the internet has done extraordinary things for commerce and for people that are bound in their home and
But
can't
those are
leave.
quick one-off sales. I'm not trying to create an ongoing relationship with Amazon and the driver that comes out here.
Sure, but again, I think that we start to things that are easy,
Right.
things that work quickly. We tend as human beings to take the path of least resistance and kind of do those things over and over again. And not only that, extend them to other areas of our life that we feel is practical. I would say that insurance in this regard is not practical. You really want a human being involved
I think
that
so.
cares about you.
It doesn't cost me anything because
No.
you're getting compensated from the carriers
Absolutely.
or whatever.
Absolutely.
So it's not like there's a cost I have to hear. I've had a business now for 20 years, a bar and restaurant, before that a PR firm. I've been in radio, in and out of radio most of my life. Started this 12 years ago. I got an attorney. You better believe I got a good attorney. I got a great accountant. I don't have an insurance guy. I just go get insurance when I need it. I go
Right.
click on quotes and compare them. I go to one of these apps and it compares all my auto insurance things.
Right.
And I pick one and I shop around and I change them all the time. And I think how smart I am. And then something bad happens like it did to me once, and I think how dumb I was.
So look, I think you're being a little critical of yourself there.
Well,
but, So I think it's preconceived notions, right? I would say that the personal insurance market, it's much easier to go on the web and put in your VIN of your car and get a really accurate quote for auto insurance. That's not the case if you buy a bar or restaurant.
No.
You need a human being to evaluate that for you, to come in and inspect your place, make sure they understand what's going on, give you recommendations on limiting losses, limiting general liability losses, slip and
Right.
falls, limiting workers' compensation claims for people.
And the things I
cutting their
never
fingers.
heard of before that we never had to protect against. I don't know if you can insure against sexual harassment claims or business interruption and
Right.
all these other sorts of things. I never
Right.
thought of as insurable risks. I thought fire was, theft was,
Right.
Liability. Sure, somebody's going to slip and fall and sue you or whatever here. But
Right.
there's all sorts of other levels of insurance. Talk about that for a second, because insurance has got not just confusing but complicated too.
Well, think about it this way. So even 60 years ago, there were actresses that would insure their legs.
Yeah, right. I remember
So-
when I was in the entertainment industry, we had people that did that.
Really-
or their hands or something, whatever their asset was.
Yeah, for the most part, you can insure against almost any loss. The principle of insurance is that you can't gain from that policy. You can only be made whole.
Right.
And that's the principle of indemnification. So if you have a type of situation in which you can prove the principle of indemnification and not gaining from being
I'm not doing
compensated
this to make
for
money.
that
I'm
loss.
just doing to
Right.
protect myself.
That's
the,
right.
the loss of something.
And can almost guarantee you'll find a market. And there are what you call admitted carriers, which are admitted by the state,
Right.
that do very common things, property, general liability, things of that nature. Then you have non-admitted carriers like Lloyd's of London. If you've ever heard of Lloyd's of London,
I have so give you another example here. So I inherited a house a number of years ago out in the desert. My late father passed away, and I held onto the house, and I think someday I'm going to live there. In the meantime, I rent it.
right?
And I quickly realized that his homeowner's policy wasn't sufficient. I've got renters in there. I
Right.
needed to up the limits and do some other things, and operates differently. My home policy may not fit for a rental commercial agreement here.
Right.
And so I had to go out, couldn't find any because it's in an earthquake area and fire hazards. It's out in Palm Springs, Palm Desert. I've got a pool, other sorts of things. Suddenly, the only one we could find was Lloyd's of London, which was a big name, but it scared me because it wasn't an admitted carrier. But they're the only ones that would handle rental properties in that area.
So it's interesting. So non-admitted carriers are still held liable by the contract. An insurance policy is a contract.
Right.
So regardless of whether or not California has admitted them as a carrier, they're still bound by that contract. So a lot of my clients will be fearful of exploring the non-admitted market.
Yeah,
And I try to assure them that they still have to pay the loss. It's just that they carry losses. They carry reserves for the types of exposures that the state is not comfortable with. And that would be things like to your point, that you have a house on a fault. You
Right.
You have
Earthquake seems to be a scary one. Everybody's pulled
Right.
out of the market, so there are
Right.
very few admitted carriers to do earthquake insurance anymore.
That's absolutely correct. A lot of carriers have pulled out of providing things like homeowners. There are things like the California Fair Act, which will provide some limited coverage. What I tell my clients is that we could always explore putting together a Frankenstein monster of a traditional admitted carrier, California Fair, and a non-admitted plan to make sure that we're piecing something together that is robust and will make sure they're covered. It can get expensive,
Right.
but when you look at the alternative of my house burning down and not having coverage versus I'm paying a little bit more and I can sleep at night, again, but it's up to the consumer, it's up to the buyer. But I always encourage people to at least look at it.
But I think it's imperative to find somebody that understands your particular situation. And I'll give you those three examples here. I run a radio station, okay? When I went out to get regular, just simple business insurance as required under my lease, I called up, I don't know, just like you said, you go Google and people that do business insurance. Many of them didn't know what to categorize me. Therefore, they couldn't evaluate the risk. Are you the same as a shoe store, or are you riskier? Is there more likely a fire because you got lots of equipment, or less likelihood? Are there other issues? Are you going to be sued because you say something inflammatory on the air or whatever here? I don't know. Nobody would touch me because they didn't know how to categorize my business.
And it's so important to accurately categorize a business because premiums are calculated based on that category,
That's what I discovered.
based on how your peer group's doing,
Right.
based on your loss history. So all three of those things are put into that formula. So when I look at what my clients do, that's something that I spend a lot of time on because
Trying to understand
Yeah.
where to put them and where to
Yes.
find them and what
And-
carriers will match them. I couldn't find anybody that did rental policies anymore
Right.
in the desert, and we found Lloyd's of London because they do giant hotels and resorts and other things.
That's right.
For them, I was small potatoes.
Right.
But for everybody else, I was frightening.
Right. And it's again, it's becoming more of an issue, especially if you've had a loss.
Yes.
Carriers are becoming very loss sensitive. I mean, insurance is loss sensitive, but what's a shame is that before it would just be, oh no, my premium's going to go up because I had a loss.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Now they're not going to renew me
Yeah.
because I had a loss.
I had that with the car insurance years ago. We had I've only had like one accident in multiple years. It wasn't that serious, but it was a bunch of damage. It wasn't my fault. Somebody hit me, and my insurance carrier dropped me.
Right. Right. So a lot of people feel that brokers, their role is to place insurance. What they don't understand entirely is that our role is also to manage the loss. So when a loss comes into my office, our team works with the carrier to hold them accountable to your contract, your policy.
Because some of them seem to want to wiggle out of this stuff
Right,
here. There's
right.
a lot of exceptions that I
Sure.
didn't know were written in there. Yeah.
So, really make sure that they're accountable to the policy, they're accountable to additional endorsements with coverage, and manage that claim. Manage the claim proactively. Make sure the examiner is doing the right things. Have those conversations
And on a
discussions
timely
around
basis, I
strategy.
hear people that say, oh, they have a
Yeah.
house. Our claim for the bar dragged on, seemed like for 6 months or a
Right,
year.
right, and that is when that brokerage team can be valuable, of really wringing out that percentage of the policy that you granted to
Invaluable,
them,
yeah.
to make sure they're getting the best outcome for you.
What little I thought we were saving through the years by being smart and cheap and was came back and bit us big time. That's what I can just tell you, folks. Don't think you're saving a penny to lose $100 million later on down the road here.
Right.
I'll give you one last thing, and then we'll go for today here. What about this confusion between home and business? There used to be business insurance, then there was home insurance. Now I'm working from home. I've got a home studio. My employees are working from home. They're taking my equipment to their home, and they're using their personal car to go do things, to go to events or pick up stuff and everything here. All of a sudden, this clear delineation between personal property and business property seems confused.
Right, and that's the excellent point, excellent question. And so there is a package policy that's available with most carriers called a business owner's policy. What this policy does is it protects your business property. So if your employees are taking their computers home, chairs, desks,
Right.
etc., you add this to your business owner's policy that you have this equipment at this individual's home. In regards to your own home, it's the same thing. You add on to that what they call a BOP, a business owner's policy, that you have this business personal property within your home. And so if you had a loss at your house, you can be covered. I always ask my clients to give me a copy of their homeowner's policy.
Yeah.
Because in the homeowner's policy, sometimes there is limited coverage for those things. Sometimes it's completely excluded.
Yeah.
If you're doing anything related to work and there's a loss, we will not cover you. So that's why it's essential that you really, if you're in that situation, you explore a business owner's policy. Regarding people driving around, so this really became an issue during the pandemic.
Yeah.
When we were shuttered in place, Paul, who was on the road when we were shuttered in place?
Nobody.
If somebody was on the road, it was because they were working.
Right.
So when the accidents occurred during the pandemic, it was mostly people on the job doing something work related.
Right.
As a result, a lot of the commercial auto carriers have no longer offered what they call non-owned hired autos. And that's the coverage that you want for your employees when they're out and about doing errands for you. And so what I've been successful doing during this time is, instead of fitting it into a commercial auto policy, I'm fitting it into their general liability policy. And I'm actually
Interesting.
doing this at a better price than I would do in the commercial auto policy. What this is in the carrier world is, the one carrier over here took a lot of losses, and they
Right.
said, look, my reserves are getting depleted. I'm not
No
making
more.
money. No more. Let's move it over to this carrier that never wrote this before, and maybe they can make some money at it. So in the general liability space, we're adding the non-owned hired autos, which you absolutely need if you have employees running errands for you, because if they get into an accident and heaven forbid they hurt somebody, you're vicariously liable.
Yeah, right.
They will follow the money, right? They will
Right.
follow the deep pockets, find you, and they will absolutely sue you.
Well, creative solutions to ever increasingly confusing, chaotic, complicated
Right.
situations that aren't clear anymore. What is it that you do, and where do you do it, and how do you do it? In a world where I think in many cases it's getting harder to get insurance as insurance carriers, suffer losses and pull out of markets and worry about their own what ifs.
Right.
It's getting even harder and harder to answer these questions all around. So I don't know why we're trying to do it ourselves. I look forward to the people. Who are you going to bring in each week? What should we look forward to in this show?
So in the next show, I want to tackle shooter events and how
there's one we never thought through.
Yeah, and that is complicating the general liability market, is making it more expensive for everyone, not just individuals who have that type of exposure.
Right.
So I'm going to bring in an individual that provides education to businesses.
And
on
we
how
used to think it
limit
was
this.
only certain types of businesses, but honestly, God, we're in Orange County. Didn't they have a bunch of shootings at some 7-Elevens
Yes,
recently?
They did.
And people go into businesses. We had a nail salon or somebody else, and I forgot what it was, in Huntington Beach, and the guy came in because his girlfriend worked there, and they broke up, and he started shooting up the place, and that was a couple of years ago. And places you wouldn't think there would be any violence or any potential for that to happen. We're all worrying about that.
Right. We're seeing it on Little League fields. It's becoming pervasive.
Well, I look forward to these conversations. I hope you're bringing some real stories of real people like I tried to share today, who've either missed the mark and wish they'd done it different, or maybe did do it right and give us the positive thing. Thank God I thought of this or did this. And because out of it, we've got to understand, we're all trying to figure out, what do I really need to really run and protect my business today? What am I really looking at when I do this stuff? And how much of it am I willing to really just roll the dice and take the risk? Or am I foolish to do that and should be thinking otherwise here?
Right.
I've wanted to do an insurance show for years, and everybody laughed at me. We're going to prove to them this is a compelling topic here, an interesting subject, because I'll tell you one, it's near and dear to me, because I've been once burned, twice shy, literally here.
Well, thanks, Paul. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this. Be sure and tune in each and every, well, we're not going to do it every week. We're going to do it once a month. Is that what we're doing the pace at it now? We'll see how that goes.
We'll see what the boss says.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can turn it into a more continuing conversation. I look forward to having this with you each and every month right here on OC Talk Radio, as we try and give you some real assurance about the real insurance you should be applying to your business, how to find it, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, and all the questions, the things you don't even know to ask. That's what we're going to ask each and every week, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.